Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people across the state of Mississippi who are working hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Listen, if you did not get the opportunity to watch my conversation with Richard Cross, who now has Mornings with Richard Cross, I really want to encourage you to listen to it. It's 2 segments. You can catch it on the Ricky Mathews Facebook page, the SuperTalk Facebook page, SuperTalk Gulf Coast Facebook page. You can go to your favorite podcast. But I really want to encourage you to listen to it. It was a terrific conversation about, his passion for Mississippi, what he brings to the table, and I think it's a conversation that will just continue on. I mean, I would expect that Richard and I will be getting together on a regular basis talking about issues that are important to Mississippi, both on this show and on his show. But he certainly hit the ground running, and I want to encourage you to pay attention to that. In fact, with that said, we're going to start a kind of a new thing today. We're going to start a new focus on this show that we'll do periodically, maybe once a month, maybe every couple of weeks. We'll see how the schedule goes. But the topic is, in the news, what are Mississippians talking about? And I couldn't think of a better guy to join me than my friend J.T. Mitchell, who's the news director at SuperTalk Mississippi News, and someone I have really enjoyed working in the trenches with. J.T., how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm great, Ricky. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Listen, we already talked about this, but the inspiration from Paul's memorial still sort of linger in my head. The role that SuperTalk has played in helping move the state forward. And I know, just based on Richard's words at the memorial, and since then just chatting with him and then watching him this week on his show, that he feels the weight of it, for sure, but he also accepts the challenge of sort of, blazing his own path and bringing maybe more listeners in, maybe reaching across demographically. It will be very interesting to watch him, but he certainly has hit the ground running, hasn't he?
No doubt. And I caught up with Richard the Friday before Monday's launch. We were discussing, some of the nuts and bolts, but we also talked about, what he's about to do. And from what I've learned, and I think that he would echo this, the best way to fill somebody's shoes, even shoes as big as the ones left by Paul Gallo, is to blaze your own path. That is absolutely the best way to fill somebody's shoes, is to, yes, continue their legacy, but do your own thing and make it your own and be successful. And I promise you that Paul Gallo will be smiling down on Richard Cross if he does that. And so far, we're a few days into week 1. Richard has been doing fantastic. Everybody knows that Richard is one of the best radio talents in the nation, and I say that with so much truth to it, at least in my mind. He is so talented, so hardworking, and I think he's going to do a great job, because that was one of the questions I asked him when we were catching up on Friday. I said, "Yeah, Richard, everybody in the Southeast pretty much knows your voice because of SuperTalk, because of ESPN, because of SEC Network, but that's all sports related. You've been filling in the last few months for Paul. I personally know that you're very in tune with what's going on politically and on the news side, but why, what's the goal with this new morning slot?" And he had a brief pause, and then he said, to matter, to make Mississippi matter, to make people across the state realize what's going on, while also getting rid of some of these stigmas that the national media places on Mississippi. Because at the end of the day, Mississippi does matter. It matters to people that live here, but Mississippi plays an integral role in how this nation works in general. And I thought that answer was beautifully done, beautifully said.
Well, look, it's first of all, he is a superb communicator. He really is. He's got a great voice, but he's a great communicator. And the key to touching people is to be authentic, is to be up on the issues, to have an opinion about the issues, to be able to articulate that in a way that people who are maybe not keeping up with the current events. I think one of the things that SuperTalk has done And one of the reasons we've been successful is that people have really busy lives. They don't have time to read newspapers and go to news websites. In fact, I want to encourage you to go to SuperTalk.fm and sign up for the newsletter, or download the SuperTalk app and get free news. I mean, that's what Mississippi is providing. But they don't have time to do that, so they tune in, and they hope that we will have a conversation about the current events, and what are the conversations that people are having. If something's really important in this state, where do we stand on the issue? I think they want to know that, and I think Richard's going to do a good job. One of the things I've enjoyed about Richard in Sports Talk Mississippi, helping to develop that from scratch, I might add. But one of the things I've enjoyed about him is then when an issue comes up that is, it could be a social issue or a political issue or some policy issue that plays out in the sports arena. What I have learned about Richard is that he's up to speed on that issue. He was already proving in his sports talk world that he could just about translate most issues in a way that people could understand them, and he was well versed. So this is not something he had to quickly learn. As you pointed out, he was already kind of up to date on the issue. He's always been sort of a student of news and politics. And, this enables him to hit the ground running.
It does. And one of Richard's best talents is he's a master interviewer. I mean, he could interview this can of Sprite and make you want to listen. He's just so good with not only doing his research, but being able to relate to his guest and pop in a few personal examples of different chapters of his life and how it relates to the conversation. It makes the guest feel at home, and the guest gives better answers. He's also not scared to ask hard questions, which I love. Obviously, I work on the news side, so I'm on the objective side of the company. But when it comes to the subjective side of radio in general, nobody wants to hear softball questions. They want to get to the meat of the issue, and I think Richard is doing a fabulous job of doing that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's going to be so much fun watching him evolve. And again, he's already hit the ground running. Another thing that, if you look at social media, whether you're, Facebook or X or you name it, everyone's talking about Doge. Some people say, well, they hadn't found much fraud at all. Other people are saying, what do you mean? But I think just on the face of it, to start out, has incredibly antiquated systems, and being able to understand that and see that. Also being able to see how some of the money was being spent, whether fraud was involved or not, is infuriating to people. I think there's, as a former publisher who spent a lot of time understanding how some of this works, there's no doubt in my mind that in some of these NGOs, there's layers of grift that's taking place. And eventually, I think Pam Bondi will get to the bottom of a lot of that. But, in the initial stages, I think it's moving fast. I think that concerns some people. But what I see and what I hear from both my Democrat friends and my Republican friends is, come on, man, shine the light and let's fix this. And the way I refer to it is, let's rip the Band-Aids off. It's time to do that. Well, what are you hearing?
That's a good question, Ricky. I'm hearing mixed reviews from the people I've spoken to. I will say a general consensus among those people is that, it's no secret that people want bureaucracy and government spending to be trimmed. I think that there's plenty of misspending and plenty of fraud that's happened historically with the U.S. government. I don't believe anybody is arguing that. And I've heard some people point at different studies or different cuts that the Department of Government Efficiency has brought out, and they've liked them. But I've also heard some people concerned about different parts of it. Some of the critiques have been what people deem a lack of consideration of the consequences. For example, we saw this whole nuclear ordeal roll out this past weekend where over 300 employees were fired. They quickly got a lot of feedback and are now trying to claw back those employees. I think people want to see it trimmed, but I think they want to see it trimmed safely where you don't have examples like that, right?
Yeah.
But then you do see all of these different items that the U.S. government is spending, especially on costs that a lot of times don't even have anything to do with the average citizen. I think people want to see that done away with. They want to see the fat trimmed a bit. I've also heard some people critique if Elon Musk is the right person to do this, because they say that this is a man who has $20 billion in government contracts in his pocket. Is that or is that not a conflict of interest? So I hear some skepticism, but I do hear some people, most people say we got to do something.
Hey, when we come back on the other side, we're going to continue this new kind of periodic show that we're going to do. In the news, what are Mississippians talking about? We'll continue with JT Mitchell after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with my friend JT Mitchell, the news director for SuperTalk Mississippi News, and we're having sort of a new, what will be a periodic show we'll do called In the News, What are Mississippians Talking About? And when we went to break, we were talking about DOGE. Just a couple of the other quick points. I would say probably the last 15, maybe more years of my career, I was involved in really massive strategic planning efforts. As an example, Nate Ritter, the second largest newspaper company in America, and 32 newspapers across the country, I co-led that effort. And then further in my career, I did other similar types of efforts. I had the opportunity to work with people who literally wrote the book on re-engineering the corporation. We literally worked directly with the CSE Index and the men who wrote that book. And so I learned early in my career around managing change, what re-engineering really entails. And I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you about that. First of all, you can't go to where you want to go if you don't know where you are now. You have to really understand the current situation. And so what they strongly believed is that you've got to get deep into the current situation the best you can be, the best you can do. And then once you understand that, and through that, low-hanging fruit will fall out to cut costs and lots of things. But you're looking at culture, you're looking at the human resource side of things. You're looking at the technology that's in place and the IT infrastructure that's there. You're looking at the management infrastructure. You're looking at all these things. And then eventually, after you've done that assessment, you start to envision what could be. And this is where new technologies are instituted and new approaches are instituted, and you begin to really streamline the process. Well, in the case of the federal government, it was so messed up, so antiquated, the systems. And, again, it depends on where you are politically, but even a lot of my moderate Democratic friends looks at how some of this money is being spent, and they're like, what in the world are they doing with our tax dollars? Okay, that's low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit kind of falls out, and you get 30 to 50 billion in savings, or some estimate as high as 100 billion. But either way, you start to see some of that low-hanging fruit. Listen, re-engineering is messy. I mean, there's cultural pushback. In this case, it's political pushback. But what's brilliant about what they're doing, JT, and this is why I think this is they're just partially into what I would refer to the current process analysis. As they continue down that road, they're using AI to help them kind of get into these systems to find stuff. And they're using specific queries to discover things. Like, for example, do the actions of specific agency align with the executive orders of the president or the need of what the president is trying to do? You'll see these kind of things that will come out. But at the end of the day, what we're going to do is continue to go down this road. And then Pam Bondi and the AG's department is going to start taking each one of these and see, are there layers of NGOs that exist where people have been skimming? I'm confident that they will find that. But we're so early in the process. It's amazing we're so early in the process and already have this significant a thing. But the more visibility we get, the more we're able to see into this, the more light we have, the more, I think, irritated the average taxpayer gets. Because we're seeing a level of visibility we haven't ever seen, really, in some respects. And there's no way we won't end up at a better place when all this is said and done. That's kind of where I am, and it's going to be messy as hell, and people are going to be throwing spears at the leaders of this, but it's going to be done in the light of day. Now, the other thing is, I wish that Elon would not get sucked into the politics, and he would be more, instead of reacting to information, wait till the information clearly states what it is, and then say what it is. Okay, so I think some misinformation has been communicated by him, and I think he's got to get better at that. But I think America is going to be in a better place when all this is said and done.
Yeah, I think you hit it. And antiquated, messy, hopefully for the good, are adjectives you just threw out. And I think the average American, average Mississippian could probably agree with that. Yeah, you make a really good point as well about avoiding misinformation. I believe it was just yesterday where President Trump and Elon Musk said tens of millions of dead people are receiving Social Security benefits. Well, that's factually incorrect. There needs to be, at least to a lot of the people I speak to who are moderate people, a balance between how you're going about it. Because like I said, the general consensus among most people I've spoken to is that they do want to see bureaucracy and government spending trimmed, but they want to see it done safely and they want to see it done the right way.
Yeah, I think when they get, if you think about where they're going, I mean, one of the things I saw this morning said what they're discovering could lead to scenarios where entities create false competition, receive contracts that are not compromise national security by sharing sensitive information. And I mean, there's the procurement, what's happening on the procurement side. The issue on the Social Security things, as you know, they may be in the system, but they may or may not be getting checks. We just don't know yet. There's an inability to really track the systems the way they need to. But believe me, they're going to figure that out, and we'll get extraordinarily accurate information about whether there's actually fraud in the system. But we just don't know that yet.
And let's be honest, whether you're talking about local government or the federal government, people like to know where their tax dollars are going. They do.
Yeah. Hey, one of the things I think on this foreign aid through USAID, and we'll leave it at this. What I thought Marco Rubio said was really good, and that is that what had happened over the years, and this happens. This is the way it works. This is why re-engineering is even necessary and morphs over time. The federal government has morphed over time. The USAID also morphed over time, such that they became an independent agency, almost not accountable to anyone. And one of the points that Marco Rubio made is that the work of USAID, lots of it is good, some of it is not good, but it needs to be aligned with the State Department. They can't have two separate missions. I think that's actually a really good point.
Yep, and this is just an example, Ricky, of what people are talking about. And I love this new segment because people in Mississippi are talking about the Department of Government Efficiency. They're talking about the new administration, whether they like it or not. It seems to just be in almost every conversation that I'm having.
It really is. So we'll continue to watch that change. It's changing every day. It's the ultimate reality TV show with extraordinary stakes. Let's put it that way. Hey, listen, you and I talked about this last week. I wrote a column about it, and you can see the column at supertalk.fm or the SuperTalk app, as you know, JT. But one of the things that I think that has been single referred to a committee that is loaded with coastal Mississippi senators, and I hear through the grapevine that they're going to give it serious consideration. So I know the lobby against it is hard, but we've got to face the music on this one, don't we?
Well, being single referred is a huge step. For people that don't know, a lot of bills that get double referred, that's their death sentence. It really is. So this one, HB 602, which is the Seafood Labeling Act, it would require restaurants and others to put in place where the seafood or the fish, shrimp, whatever that consumers are purchasing is from. Is it from the U.S.? Is it from a different country? So that one, it's big that it's been referred to the Senate Ports and Marine Resources, like you said, full of coastal senators. But now it's just got to pass the actual floor. I have a feeling it's going to get through committee, but we'll see. The House passed it easily, and that's an understatement.
Yeah, with not a single dissenting vote.
No, and you and I talked last week about how this bill comes in the aftermath of so many negative chapters that we've seen over the past year alone. I mean, you had a restaurant and the wholesaler both plead guilty to mislabeling seafood. Because when you think about it, people that go to places like the Gulf Coast to eat fresh food from that place's backyard. And to get there and pay a lot of money for what you think is Gulf shrimp or whatever it is, that's disheartening when you find out that it was actually a million miles away on the other side of the earth.
And one of the points I made is that we can't endure another wave of negative stories that were literally global. I mean, stories in Europe about Biloxi seafood. That's not good. And we got a chance to do it. The other issue is that more DNA testing is coming. And so we can't hide. We have got to just address this and move forward. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with JT Mitchell. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. We're having today what will be a new segment for our new show, actually, for this show, the Ricky Mathews Show, entitled "In the News, What Are Mississippians Talking About?" I'm joined today with my friend JT Mitchell, who's the news director at SuperTalk Mississippi News. So anyway, we were talking about the seafood labeling issue. I wrote a column about it. You can see the column at supertalk.fm. But before we kind of move on from that issue, anything else you want to say about that, JT?
Well, I almost cut you off before the break. I do think that this bill requiring people to label where their food is from, it's a step in the right direction. At the same time, we have seen instances of this not being a one-sided issue. We saw a restaurant, if not multiple restaurants, but we also saw the suppliers who possibly are telling these restaurants that it is Gulf Fresh, but actually it's from Asia. And so it's a systemic deal. You mentioned the DNA part. That's going to be a big conversation moving forward, because if the restaurant's being lied to, they're labeling exactly what the supplier is telling them it is, so they wouldn't know. But then we have examples of the restaurants knowing and mislabeling purposely. So it's a systemic deal. And this legislation has been done in places like Alabama and places like Louisiana, which we share a similar region with our Gulf Coast. Really, at the end of the day, the goal is for when people who live on the coast or travel to the coast go there to pay for fresh seafood, that they're getting what they're actually paying for.
And I think we'll get it done. If we don't get it done, we'll endure some more pain, and eventually there's a powerful lubrication to change that comes from pain. we will get this done one way or the other. Hey, listen, we had a story at SuperTalk Mississippi News, and we've talked about it on this show, but the headline, Senate's in-person early voting triggers intra-party Republican spat. And I have to be honest with you, I was really disappointed in Governor Tate Reeves and the way he handled this with Jeremy England, who people who've listened to the show know I've spent hours on the show with Jeremy. He's a terrific leader in the Senate, but he's doing what he believes is right, and it's foolproof. The way that they're approaching in-person early voting is what we need in this state, and 47 other states do it. So. But I was really disappointed. I wonder if somebody who works for the governor did that, but he's got to approve it. But the fallback from it has really created a buzz, hasn't it?
Well, that was going to be my question. Have they fired an intern or two at the governor's office recently? Because his social media Twitter tirade, it's X now, but his tirade on social media, or whoever drafted that, it has a lot of irony to it. And I'm being objective when saying it has irony to it because, as you mentioned, 47 states, Republican, Democrat, have some form of no excuse early voting or no excuse absentee voting. And even during this past presidential election, our now president, Donald Trump, a Republican, spent a whopping amount of money along with the party to promote early voting because they knew it would help get him elected. I mean, there was a Politico report that Trump's campaign spent over $15 million specifically urging GOP voters to go vote early. But yet the governor of Mississippi is saying, oh, we can't have early voting. That is a Democratic way of thinking. Well, not according to the Republican president.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. What I want to speak to is simply the message that it sends, and this is a little bit what Richard Cross and I talked about. And of course, he had his strong feelings about this issue as well. But it's this notion of, I think the average Mississippian would be really, really, really surprised to see how many bipartisan efforts lead to bills passing. A lot of bills that pass Mississippi. I mean, one that comes to mind immediately is the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. Another one that comes to mind in the House just right off the bat is the seafood labeling bill that we're dealing with. The kind of effort that took to pass a new state flag or a new state song. Again, I could go on and on, but there are a lot of smaller bills. I wouldn't say less important, but there are other bills that have a tremendous bipartisan effort. We don't have to be like you see on the national level where there's extreme polarization. In Mississippi, we can mostly get along. Now, look, we're going to disagree about things, that's for sure. But this notion that if you reach across the aisle, you're a bad person, that's a terrible message to send out.
It is, and it comes from the top. The message is coming from the governor's mansion. When you don't see people work together, whether it's in politics, sports, I played sports through college. When you don't see people work together, you tend to go backward.
Well, and then you see Joel Carter went up before the Senate and talked about this and said, essentially what you and I are saying now, how unfortunate it is, and that we're better than that. And after he, gave his piece whenever it was in the last, week or so, after he got done giving his piece to the whole Senate, there was a sustained clap. It went on for a while, which is to say that whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you really do want to see us getting along. You do. You don't want to see wedges being driven in ways that we shouldn't be doing it.
That's absolutely correct. And, Senator England, and for those who may have just tuned in, what we're talking about is the early voting bill that would be 15 days before an election. You can go to your local clerk's office and you don't have to have an excuse, and you can go ahead and cast your ballot. Nowadays, I believe it's a 45-day absentee period, but you have to have an excuse, whether you're disabled, out of town on election day, 65 years or older. It would kind of streamline the process that other states have already started and have streamlined. But what I wanted to say was Jeremy England, he honestly has responded to this outside of one social media post where he said Donald Trump doesn't want you, Governor Tate Reeves. Outside of that, he's responded to this kind of masterfully. He was on with Richard Wednesday morning, and he's undoubtedly been the bigger person during this inter-party scuffle. Yes, he made the one social media post I just referenced, but overall his message has been that he and the governor are friends. He and the governor agree on most to everything, just not this. This bill, the no excuse early voting bill, according to England, is just a bump in the road that's called politics. And that road can oftentimes be bumpy, but I will say the governor is making it a little bit more bumpy than it has to be.
Listen, I think in the Speaker, Jason White, and Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, we have men who are willing to have tough conversations, are willing to cross the aisle. They're willing to build consensus. Again, they'll do it in their own way. But I ran across this quote, in fact, just this morning, and it hit me that it sort of applied to how Jeremy has handled this. But it said this: the best revenge is none. Heal, move on, and don't become like those who hurt you. I mean, and listen, I had a boss at Mississippi Power when I worked at Mississippi Power for about 3 or 4 years when I was really young, when I was going to school at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. And my boss, Bobby Nichols, was terrific. And one of the things he said to me is that one of the biggest challenges we'll have as we grow up, as I was a young guy at the time, was you have to learn not to waller with the pigs. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is sit on the fence, but you got to learn to do that. If you jump in and waller with them, you become them. And I never forgot that. It was really good advice. I've used it in so many aspects of my life. Sometimes it's just best to just stay on the fence. And I wish more political leaders in our state would take that approach. And when they do, we can have what we learned at the memorial, at Paul's Memorial, the sense that we can disagree on a lot, but still love each other, still work together well, and have respect for one another. I think that's a calling card for Mississippi, and we can't lose it. I don't think we will lose it. I think there are too many people embedded in the process and we're going to be in good shape. So but it's been an interesting chapter in Mississippi's history, hasn't it?
It has. And I really do encourage people to go read that article at supertalk.fm. Gives you all the insight you need to know into this little Republican spat being led by Governor Tate Reeves.
Listen, direct shipment of wine looked like it was on again, off again, on again. Now off again. Then now it's back on again. We actually may get this done.
Yeah, if the governor signs it, or at least if he lets it go through without his signature. But yeah, Mississippi has arguably the most jumbled set of alcohol laws in the entire U.S. And to finally join, I believe it's also 47 others in allowing direct wine shipment is something a lot of people were cheering to on Tuesday night, Ricky.
I know they were. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with JT Mitchell. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show as we continue our conversation with JT Mitchell, who is the news director at SuperTalk Mississippi News. And this new feature that we're going to do periodically, what's in the news? What are Mississippians talking about? Okay, one of the big changes that we're looking to, I don't know if it may be just mostly insider baseball. I wonder how much people are actually talking about the income tax proposals. And maybe one of the reasons why we're not hearing more buzz about it is it's a little hard to any dimensions to it. The Senate bill is a little bit easier to get your head around. What are you hearing these days?
Well, it is the biggest headline so far of this session. I will say that. For those who are just now catching up, the House has introduced and passed their own tax reform plan. That one would eliminate income tax by 2037, reduce grocery tax to 4% by in 2036. You'd have an additional 1.5 cents sales tax added in 2026, and you'd have an additional 15-cent increase on your gas. Their overarching goal is to eliminate income tax, while also slashing the grocery tax just a bit over time, of course, for both. The Senate last week, they held a press conference and unveiled their plan. While there is no bill text, we hope that bill text comes out this week. We think it will. What their plan is to stop short of full elimination of income tax. They're going to go down to 2.99% by 2030. More so, they're prioritizing an immediate ASAP slash to the grocery tax. That would go from 7 to 5% in 2025. There would also be no sales tax increase across the board like you see with the House side on non-grocery items. And you would have a little bit extra gas tax under that as well, because you have to make up for it. But a lot of people are talking about it, Ricky. A lot of people want to have some relief in their pocketbooks, no doubt about it. But more so at this point, it's going to be about meeting in the middle, getting leaders from both chamber to get inside a room and to figure it out. Because you got to figure it out if you want something to get to the desk of Governor Reeves. So we'll see if they end up going all the way down to 0-0 on elimination on income tax. I do have a feeling something will get to Tate Reeves's desk.
There's also going to be, as part of this, a debate about whether they should address the issues of the state retirement system, or whether they should also address MDOT and their need for funds on an ongoing basis. So there's a lot to be debated yet, isn't there?
There is, and both plans do help MDOT. I believe the House plan about $300 million, the Senate plan about $260, helping MDOT with our roadways and infrastructure. PERS is not included in the Senate's plan, but the Senate does have a different bill that would kind of help shore up that $25 billion liability. The House's plan would tackle PERS within. And there's a lot of details here. I know there are. But at the end of the day, they're just going to have to meet in the middle. The good news is that both chambers are at least pointed toward tax cuts. They disagree on where the cuts should come and which form and fashion they should come in, but they're both pointed in the right direction, which gives me a little bit of hope.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Listen, there's more we could talk about, but I want to remind people that if you care about Mississippi sports, you got to tune in to Sports Talk Mississippi, and you got to go to SuperTalk News, supertalk.fm, and click on the sports button. You're not going to find more comprehensive coverage anywhere else than at SuperTalk Mississippi. You guys put a lot of care in that, don't you?
Oh, as we say, Ricky, cover it like a blanket because, a few items that control Mississippi: politics, sports, and music. Food can also be sprinkled in there, but sports is a big one. People in this state really do care about sports. So we're covering everything right now: men's, women's basketball, baseball season just started, and everything's looking good right now, at least on those two fronts. And then, nowadays with college football, the off season is arguably just as energetic as when you're in season. So we really are covering it like a blanket.
Yeah, I get the distinct impression that Ole Miss is going to still be in that conversation next year.
Yeah, I think so. Lane Kiffin has done a tremendous job rebuilding that program. And people complained last year, but when you really look back at it, a team like last year and their success, 7 years ago, Ole Miss fans would have been begging for. So he's done a great job. On the basketball front, both Mississippi State and Ole Miss, they stay the course. They'll both be in the NCAA tournament. It would be the first time since 2019 both make it there. Sports all around is in a very positive place in this state. Because, for example, Southern Miss baseball on Wednesday night beat ranked Mississippi State. Sometimes we beat ourselves up, our different teams, but overall we're succeeding.
Yeah, Southern Miss, man, they hadn't quite. It's going to be interesting to watch their football program this year, but they hadn't quite figured that one out, how to succeed in the NIL world. But at the end of the day, man, when it comes to baseball and some of their other sports, they're always in the conversation. Listen, JT, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Absolutely, Ricky. Thanks, man.
You bet. Hey, thanks for joining us on this In the News. What are Mississippians talking about? I look forward to doing this again in the near future. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.